The old man had been walking for 3 hours before anyone noticed he was gone. His name was Kofi, and he was 82 years old, a respected elder of the Maasai community in northern Tanzania. But Alzheimer's had been stealing his mind piece by piece for the past 2 years, and on this morning, it had stolen his sense of direction entirely. His grandson, Langai, discovered the empty bed at dawn. The blankets were thrown back, Kofi's walking stick was gone, and the door to the hut stood open. Langai's heart dropped into his stomach. His grandfather had wandered off 3 times before, but never this early, never when it was still dark. Langai ran through the village, waking the other warriors. "Grandfather is gone. We need to search now." Within minutes, 8 young Maasai warriors were spreading out from the village in different directions, calling Kofi's name, following tracks in the soft morning earth. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky pink and orange when one of the warriors, Parsaloi, found Kofi's footprints leading away from the village toward the northeast. Toward the Serengeti. Toward lion territory. Langai felt his blood turn to ice. His grandfather had walked straight into one of the most dangerous areas in East Africa, a region where 3 separate lion prides competed for territory, where territorial males patrolled constantly, where a confused old man would be seen as easy prey. The warriors began running, following the tracks, calling out. But Kofi had a 3-hour head start, and his tracks showed he'd been walking fast, with purpose, even though that purpose existed only in his confused mind. 2 hours into the search, Parsaloi suddenly stopped and grabbed Langai's arm. "Listen." Everyone froze. In the distance, maybe half a kilometer away, they could hear something that made every warrior grip his spear tighter. Lions. Multiple lions. Calling to each other with deep, resonant roars. And somewhere among those roars, barely audible, was a human voice. Singing. Kofi was singing one of the old Maasai songs, his voice thin and wavering but unmistakable. He was alive. But he was surrounded by lions. The warriors ran toward the sound, their red shukas streaming behind them, their hearts pounding with fear and desperate hope. They crested a small hill and looked down into a shallow valley dotted with acacia trees. And they saw something that would be talked about for generations, something that defied every rule of nature they'd ever learned. Kofi was sitting cross-legged under an acacia tree, still singing, his walking stick laid across his lap. And surrounding him in a loose circle, like a living fence of tawny bodies, were 7 lions. Not attacking. Not stalking. Not showing any aggression at all. Just sitting. Watching. Guarding. Langai's breath caught in his throat. The pride consisted of 5 adult lionesses, 1 massive male with a dark mane, and 1 juvenile male. They were positioned around Kofi like sentries, facing outward, as if protecting him from threats rather than being the threat themselves. One of the lionesses was so close to Kofi that her shoulder was almost touching his leg. The old man seemed completely unaware of the danger, lost in whatever memory his damaged mind was replaying, singing a song about cattle and rain in the old days. "What do we do?" Parsaloi whispered. "If we approach, they might attack him. If we don't, he could still be killed." Langai's mind raced. Every warrior was trained from childhood on how to defend against lions, how to scare them away from livestock, how to kill them if absolutely necessary. But this situation was unlike anything in their training. These lions weren't behaving like predators. They were behaving like protectors. "Wait," Langai said quietly. "Something's happening here. Something we don't understand. If we charge in with spears, we might trigger an attack. Let's watch. Let's see." The warriors spread out along the ridge, staying low, observing. The sun climbed higher, and still the lions maintained their circle around Kofi. The old man's singing faded, and he seemed to doze off, his head nodding forward. One of the lionesses shifted position, moving closer to Kofi. Every warrior tensed, ready to charge down the hill despite the distance. But the lioness didn't attack. She laid down, positioning her body between Kofi and the morning sun, creating shade for the old man. The massive male stood and stretched, then walked to a different position, still maintaining the circle, still facing outward. He was scanning the horizon, his tail flicking occasionally, his posture alert. He was standing guard. "They're protecting him," one of the younger warriors whispered in disbelief. They're actually protecting him. That's impossible, another said. Lions don't protect humans. They hunt humans. Then explain what we're seeing, Langai replied. For 2 more hours, the standoff continued. The warriors didn't dare approach. The lions didn't move away. And Kofi dozed peacefully in the shade, completely unaware that he was surrounded by Africa's most dangerous predators. Then something changed. The male lion suddenly stood alert, his ears pricked forward, his body tense. The lionesses immediately responded, rising to their feet, their attention focused on something in the distance that the humans couldn't yet see. Lunga pulled out the small binoculars he carried and scanned the direction the lions were looking. His stomach clenched. Hyenas. A pack of at least 15 spotted hyenas, moving across the plain, heading directly toward the tree where Kofi sat. Hyenas were scavengers, but they were also opportunistic hunters. A confused old man sitting alone would be easy prey. The pack was close enough now that some of them had spotted Kofi, and they were changing direction, loping toward him with increasing speed. The lions saw them too. The male roared, a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the ground. It was a warning, a challenge, a declaration. This human is under our protection. The hyenas slowed but didn't stop. They were testing, probing, trying to understand why lions were defending a human. The male lion roared again and took 3 powerful steps toward the approaching hyenas. 2 of the lionesses joined him, positioning themselves between the hyenas and Kofi. The message was clear. To get to the old man, you'll have to go through us. The hyenas circled, staying about 50 meters away, calling to each other with their eerie laughing sounds. They outnumbered the lions 2 to 1, and they knew it. If they all charged together, they might be able to overwhelm the pride and get to Kofi. But lions were apex predators, and even outnumbered, they were formidable. The hyenas would take casualties. The question was whether Kofi was worth the risk. The standoff lasted 10 minutes. The male lion held his ground, the lionesses flanking him, all 3 facing down the hyena pack. The other 4 lions remained around Kofi, maintaining the defensive circle. Finally, the hyena pack leader, a massive female with scarred flanks, made the decision. She turned away, barking commands to her pack. The hyenas retreated, loping off toward easier prey. The lions had won without fighting a single battle. They'd won through sheer presence, through the threat of what they could do. And they'd done it while protecting a human. The male lion watched until the hyenas were completely gone, then returned to his position in the circle. The pride settled back into their patient vigil. On the ridge, the Maasai warriors were stunned into silence. What they just witnessed shouldn't have been possible. Lions and humans were natural adversaries. Maasai warriors killed lions in coming-of-age ceremonies. Lions killed Maasai cattle and occasionally Maasai people. But these lions had just defended a Maasai elder from a hyena pack. We need to get him, Langai said finally. Before something else happens. Before the lions change their minds. How? Parsaloi asked. If we approach, they might see us as threats. Langai thought for a moment, then made a decision that was either brilliant or suicidal. I'll go alone. No spears, no weapons. I'll approach slowly, peacefully. Lions understand body language. If I show no threat, maybe they'll let me take him. That's crazy. Do you have a better idea? Langai interrupted. That's my grandfather down there. I'm not leaving him. Before anyone could argue further, Langai removed his spear, took off the belt that held his knife, and began walking down the hill toward the lions. His hands were empty, held slightly away from his body, showing he carried no weapons. His heart hammered so hard he could hear it in his ears. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run, to not walk voluntarily toward 7 lions. But he kept his pace steady, his movements calm. The lions noticed him immediately. The male stood, watching Langai's approach. The lionesses turned their attention to him, their bodies tensing. Langai kept walking. 50 meters away. 40 meters. 30. He began speaking in Ma, the Maasai language, his voice low and steady. He was talking to the lions as if they could understand him, as if they were reasonable beings who could be negotiated with. I mean no harm. I come for the old man. He's my grandfather. He is confused. He doesn't know where he is. I need to take him home. 20 meters. The male lion took 2 steps toward Lengai, his massive head low, his amber eyes locked on the young warrior. Lengai stopped. He didn't crouch, didn't make himself smaller. That would signal fear or submission, and lions could sense fear like blood in water. Instead, he stood tall, met the male's eyes briefly, then looked away, showing respect, not challenge. He is my elder, Lengai continued. My family. You are protecting him, and for that, I am grateful. But he needs to go home now. He needs water and food and his family. The male lion stared at Lengai for what felt like an eternity. Then, incredibly, he stepped aside. The lionesses parted, creating a path to where Kofi sat sleeping under the tree. Lengai could barely believe what was happening. He walked slowly into the circle of lions, his legs shaking despite his outward calm. He knelt beside his grandfather and gently touched his shoulder. Grandfather. It's Lengai. It's time to go home. Kofi's eyes opened, clouded and confused. Lengai? Where are we? I was looking for the cattle. They wandered away. I know, grandfather. But the cattle are safe. Let me take you home. He helped Kofi to his feet, supporting the old man's weight. Kofi was unsteady, exhausted from his long walk and the hours in the heat. Lengai looked at the male lion, who had moved back into position, watching with those intelligent amber eyes. Thank you, Lengai said softly. The lion blinked slowly, the kind of slow blink that cat owners recognize as a sign of trust and calm. Lengai began walking backward, supporting his grandfather, moving slowly out of the circle of lions. The pride watched but didn't follow, didn't threaten. When Lengai and Kofi were 30 meters away, the lions finally moved. But they didn't charge or attack. Instead, they simply stood and walked away in the opposite direction, the male leading, the lionesses following, melting back into the tall grass as if they'd never been there. By the time Lengai and Kofi reached the ridge where the other warriors waited, the lions had disappeared completely. The journey back to the village was quiet. Everyone was processing what they'd witnessed, trying to make sense of the impossible. When they reached the village, the entire community gathered around as Lengai explained what had happened. The elders listened in silence, their weathered faces showing various shades of disbelief and wonder. Kofi's wife, Nalangu, wept with relief, holding her husband close. The ancestors protected him, she said. They sent the lions to guard him. But Lengai wasn't satisfied with spiritual explanations alone. Something about the male lion had been familiar. Something about the way he moved, the pattern of scars on his flank. That evening, Lengai went to visit one of the oldest men in the village, Sakimba, who was 93 and had been a legendary warrior in his youth. Grandfather Sakimba, Lengai said, tell me about the lions my grandfather Kofi encountered when he was young. Sakimba's eyes lit up with memory. Ah, you're wondering about that? You think there's a connection? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Sakimba settled back and began to tell a story that few people still remembered. Your grandfather was 23 years old, newly initiated as a warrior. One day, while watching cattle, he found a lion cub caught in a poacher's snare. The cub was maybe 4 months old, its leg trapped in the wire, bleeding badly. Lengai leaned forward. What did he do? What he shouldn't have done, according to tradition. He freed the cub. He used his knife to cut the wire, wrapped the cub's leg with cloth from his shuka, and stayed with the cub until it was strong enough to walk. The cub's pride had abandoned it. Lions sometimes do that when a cub is injured, knowing it can't keep up with the pride's travels. But Kofi saved it? He did. And more than that, he carried the cub nearly 10 kilometers to where he'd last seen the pride. He wanted to reunite them. It took him 2 days, but he found the pride and released the cub near them. The pride accepted the cub back. Sakimba paused, looking at Lengai intently. That cub had distinctive markings, 3 scars on his left flank from the wire, and a notch in his right ear. Lengai's breath caught. The male lion today had 3 scars on his left flank. He'd noticed them when the lion stood in the sun. How old would that cub be now? If he survived? Maybe 14 years old. Old for a wild lion, but not impossible. Males can live to 15 in good territory with plenty of prey. You think that was the same lion? I think, Sakimba said slowly, that lions have longer memories than we give them credit for. And I think that a lion who was saved by a human might remember, might pass that memory to his pride, might teach his females that not all humans are enemies. But grandfather doesn't remember saving a lion. He doesn't remember much of anything anymore. The lion doesn't know that. All the lion knows is scent, and even with Alzheimer's, your grandfather's scent hasn't changed. The lion recognized him. And maybe the lion remembered the debt. Before we continue, make sure to hit like and subscribe. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. Now let me tell you what happened next. Word of the incident spread far beyond the village. Within a week, wildlife researchers from the Serengeti Lion Project came to interview Lengai and the other witnesses. They listened to the story with professional skepticism that gradually shifted to amazement as they checked the facts. Dr. Kamau, a Kenyan wildlife biologist who'd been studying Serengeti lions for 20 years, was particularly interested. The pride you described, 5 females, 1 dominant male, 1 juvenile male, that's the Serenera pride. We've been tracking them for 15 years. He pulled up photos on his laptop. Is this the male? Lengai looked at the image and nodded immediately. Yes, that's him. I'd recognize those scars anywhere. His name in our database is SM7. Serenera male number 7. He's 14 years old, which makes him one of the oldest males still maintaining a territory in this region. And you're right about the scars, he's had those since he was young. We assumed they were from a fight, but if your grandfather's story is true. Dr. Kamau trailed off, shaking his head in wonder. Can I see more photos? Lengai asked. Dr. Kamau scrolled through dozens of images, the pride hunting, playing, resting. Then he stopped on one photo that made Lengai gasp. It showed SM7 from years ago, much younger, probably around 5 years old. But what caught Lengai's attention was something else in the photo. In the background, barely visible, was a Maasai man wearing a red shuka. The image was blurry, but the man appeared to be standing completely still while the young male lion, SM7, sat about 20 meters away, both of them just looking at each other. When was this taken? Lengai asked. Dr. Kamau checked the metadata. About 9 years ago. 2015, we were tracking SM7 when he was establishing his first territory. Our photographer captured this interaction, but we didn't think much of it at the time. The Maasai man didn't approach the lion didn't threaten the man. They just acknowledged each other, then both walked away. Do you know who the man was? No. We see Maasai herders occasionally in our research area. We didn't get close enough to identify him. But Lengai knew. Even from the blurry photo, even 9 years later, he recognized his grandfather's posture, his way of standing. Kofi had encountered that lion before, multiple times over the years. And each time, both man and beast had remembered their first meeting, the day a young warrior saved a dying cub's life. Over the next 3 months, Dr. Kamau's team set up additional camera traps in the area where Kofi had wandered. They wanted to document SM7's pride more closely, to understand if this behavior was unique or part of a larger pattern. What they discovered was extraordinary. The Serenera pride had unusually low aggression toward humans. When they encountered Maasai herders, they typically moved away rather than confronting. When livestock wandered into their territory, they ignored them in favor of wild prey, highly unusual behavior, as lions typically saw livestock as easy meals. It was as if SM7 had taught his pride that humans, specifically Maasai humans, were not prey, not enemies, but something else. Something to be respected. Dr. Kamau published a paper titled, Multigenerational Memory in Panthera leo, Evidence of Reciprocal Altruism Between Human and Wild Lion. It included detailed documentation of the incident with Kofi, witness testimonies, and genetic analysis of SM7 confirming his age and lineage. The paper concluded that SM7 had likely recognized Kofi by scent, even after 60 years, and had responded to that recognition by providing protection. More remarkably, he'd communicated this protection imperative to his pride, demonstrating complex social learning and memory in wild lions. the scientific community was split. Half praised the research as groundbreaking evidence of animal intelligence and memory. The other half insisted there must be alternative explanations: coincidence, misinterpretation of normal lion behavior, anthropomorphization. But Leng Ai and the other warriors who'd witnessed it had no doubt. They knew what they'd seen. 6 months after the incident, Kofi's Alzheimer's progressed to the point where he could no longer walk unassisted. Nalangu cared for him with fierce dedication, and Leng Ai visited daily, sitting with his grandfather, telling him stories of his own youth even though Kofi rarely responded. One afternoon, as Leng Ai sat beside Kofi's bed, the old man suddenly gripped his grandson's hand with surprising strength. "The lions," Kofi said, his voice clear for the first time in weeks. "I remember the lions." Leng Ai leaned forward. "What do you remember, grandfather?" "The cub. I saved the cub. In the wire. I carried him. Did I tell you that story?" "You did, grandfather. A long time ago. And that cub remembered you. He grew up and protected you when you wandered into his territory." Kofi's clouded eyes filled with tears. "He remembered? After all this time?" "Yes. He remembered." "That's good," Kofi whispered. "That's very good. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. The disease makes me confused. But the cub was real. The wire was real. I freed him." "You did, grandfather. And because of what you did, the lions saved your life." Kofi smiled, a genuine smile that Leng Ai hadn't seen in months. Then his eyes drifted closed, and he fell into a peaceful sleep. He died 2 weeks later, surrounded by family, his mind finally at rest. At the funeral, following Maasai tradition, the community gathered to celebrate Kofi's life. Warriors performed the jumping dance. Women sang the old songs. Stories were told of his bravery, his wisdom, his kindness. But the story that resonated most was the one about the lions. About the young warrior who'd risked everything to save a trapped cub, and the old man with Alzheimer's who'd been protected decades later by that same lion, now grown powerful and wise. It became a teaching story, told to children and visitors alike. Kindness is never forgotten. What you do when no one is watching matters. The bonds we create echo across time. 3 months after Kofi's death, Leng Ai was guiding a small group of researchers near the area where his grandfather had wandered. They were tracking the Serenera pride, documenting their movements. As they crested a familiar hill, Leng Ai stopped suddenly. There, in the valley below, was 7, the old male lion, now 15 years old and showing his age. His mane was graying, his movements slower. He was alone, separated from his pride, common for aging males who were being challenged by younger lions for dominance. 7 was lying under the same acacia tree where he'd protected Kofi months before. As Leng Ai watched through binoculars, the lion stood slowly, stretched, and looked up toward the ridge. Their eyes met across the distance. Leng Ai placed his hand over his heart, a gesture his grandfather might have made. The old lion held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked away into the tall grass, his tail held high, his gait still proud despite his age. "Did you know that lion?" one of the researchers asked. "My grandfather did," Leng Ai replied quietly. "They saved each other's lives." 7 disappeared into the golden grass, and Leng Ai never saw him again. Camera trap data suggested the old male died about 2 months later, in his sleep, under a tree, a peaceful death, rare for wild lions. But his legacy lived on. The Serenera pride maintained its unusual behavior toward Maasai people. The lionesses taught their cubs the same lessons SM7 had taught them. Not all humans are enemies, some humans are friends, and kindness, even from a different species, should be remembered and repaid. Dr. Kamau's research continued, documenting what he called the Kofi effect, the multi-generational transmission of pro-social behavior toward humans in a wild lion pride. His work became foundational in the field of animal cognition and memory. And in Maasai villages across Tanzania, when elders taught children about living alongside wildlife, they told the story of Kofi and the lion, a reminder that the bonds between humans and animals run deeper than we understand, that memory transcends species, and that what we do in the hidden moments of our lives can echo across decades. Today, When Maasai warriors encounter the descendants of SM7's pride, they show respect rather than hostility. And the lions, remarkably, often respond in kind, moving away calmly rather than charging, coexisting rather than competing. It's a fragile peace, maintained by memory and mutual respect. A peace that began 60 years ago when a young warrior made a choice that everyone said was foolish, saving a lion cub instead of killing it or leaving it to die. Kofi probably never imagined that his act of compassion would save his own life 6 decades later. He probably never knew that he was creating a legacy that would change how an entire lion pride interacted with humans. But that's the thing about kindness. You never know when it will return to you. You never know whose life you're changing. You never know how far the ripples will spread. If this story moved you, please share it. Tell us in the comments about a time when a small act of kindness came back to you in unexpected ways. Hit like and subscribe for more stories that prove animals have longer memories, deeper emotions, and more complex social bonds than we've ever given them credit for. Because somewhere in the Serengeti, lions and Maasai people share a territory in relative peace, not because of fences or laws, but because of a memory passed down through generations, a story told in roars and scent and the slow blink of trust. Sometimes the greatest protection comes from the most unexpected source. Sometimes an old man with Alzheimer's knows more than he remembers. And sometimes the lives we save end up saving us. The circle of life isn't just about predator and prey. Sometimes it's about compassion, memory, and the extraordinary things that happen when different species choose friendship over fear.